As they do every March, the NHL general managers gathered in Florida this week for 3 days of meetings to discuss potential changes to rules, regulations, and other things surrounding the league. Well, in this video, I'm bringing you 6 changes that could possibly be coming to the National Hockey League. NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman mentioned that hockey-related revenue for this season looks to be right on target, coming in probably with an estimate around $6.2 billion. That means that revenue-wise, it's been a healthy season for the NHL as they look to continue to build year after year. And it also means it looks good for projections for next year's salary cap. Colin Campbell, the NHL's Director of Hockey Operations, admittedly said, quote, "These aren't exciting changes," and that sums it up pretty nicely. The changes that are looking to be going into effect next year aren't anything super blockbuster or anything really wild. Nothing certainly that's causing quite a stir, but they're interesting nonetheless, and I'd like to bring you 6 of them today. I want to start today with the thing that has caused the most hubbub and speculation for a good portion of the season ever since the GMs casually got together earlier this year and had started mentioning that they were possibly looking at making changes to the current structure of 3-on-3 overtime in the NHL. There was a lot of talk about GMs that wanted to remove so much of the ability for players to constantly cycle back into their own zone to kind of regroup and then regroup and then regroup, and saying that it was losing some of that dynamic entertainment from 3-on-3 overtime. And so lots of speculation was being tossed around. Are they going to put in rules where once you cross the blue line, once you gain the zone, you can't go back? Or are there going to be stoppages? Should they increase the length of the overtime? There was all sorts of speculation. And what did the GMs finally decide? That it's fine the way it is. Go figure. They said that while, yes, that does happen, that it happens relatively quickly and then play moves on with both teams moving in sequence from zone to zone. And so they don't feel at this point in time that anything needs to change with the 3-on-3 overtime format. There was a little bit of discussion that the ECHL has experimented a little bit with a 3-on-3 7-minute overtime, but that didn't really gain any traction. It didn't really go anywhere. So for now, 3-on-3 overtime remains at 5 minutes, status quo, no changes going forward. Items 2 and 3 on the list both relate to goaltenders. The first of which is, up until now, officials have had the ability to penalize a skater should it be determined that they intentionally dislodged the net during play. The change to this rule would simply be adding the goaltender into that equation as well, meaning officials, if they feel that the goaltender is intentionally dislodging the net during play, that the goaltender can also be assessed a penalty for that. Next, also in relation to goalies, if a goaltender comes out of the game due to injury, or is pulled from the game thanks to the concussion spotter, and the backup goaltender comes into play, what happens now typically is the backup goalie comes in and play resumes. What GMs want to do now is add something into the rule book that mandates that replacement goaltender gets a 45 to 60 second warm-up, give them a chance to get their muscles moving and their blood flowing and really physically be ready to play the game. The next item on the list, number 4 on our list, is not so much a new rule change. It's simply that they are going to ask officials to start enforcing an existing rule much more often. Players, when they are waiting for a shift change to come onto the ice, you know that a lot of players will throw a leg over the boards waiting to quickly jump onto the ice. Technically, they're not supposed to do that. Well, earlier this season in a game, I believe it was Winnipeg versus Minnesota, a lineman actually got accidentally cut by a skate from a player who had their leg dangling over the bench. So there is a proposal on the table now for officials to start enforcing this rule. They will get a warning from the officials, and both their bench and the opposition's bench will be notified that a warning has been given to a player for that infraction. If it happens again during the game, they'll be handed an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. So we'll see how quickly this comes into action, and we'll see if it takes a little while for teams to remember that they can't do that. Before we get to our last two items on today's list, if you're enjoying this kind of content and want more weekly content regarding the Montreal Canadiens, the Laval Rocket, and NHL topics in general, then I would really appreciate it if you tap the subscribe button right below and hit that like button while you're at it. Okay, so our last two items on the list both have to do with expansions to a coach's ability to challenge things that happen during the course of a game. First up is the nefarious puck over the glass delay of game penalty. Now, although it would make for some pretty fun television watching, this is not a coach's challenge that's going to be put into place that a team could challenge if they feel an official missed a puck over the glass delay of game call on the opposing team. This challenge would simply come into play if a team received a delay of game penalty for the puck going out of play, if the team could then prove through video that the puck actually did hit something on the way out and that the delay of game penalty should not have been called. Well, keep in mind what is at risk if they do this. That team has already been assessed a delay of game penalty, so they will already be shorthanded. If they win, great. It goes back to even strength play. However, if they lose the challenge, like what happens when a coach loses a challenge, they will receive a penalty for that, which means their 5-on-4 penalty kill becomes a 5-on-3 penalty kill. That brings us to our last item on the list, which is another coach's challenge, which is an expansion of a challenge already in place. This one relates to high sticking infractions. Currently, if a team is assessed a 4-minute high sticking penalty, obviously because they've drawn blood, the coach has the ability to challenge that call if they can prove that the player who received the stick in the face actually was hit by their own stick, one of their teammates' sticks, or by the puck itself. What is being proposed now is that that is expanded to a coach being able to challenge for that even just with a 2-minute minor penalty for high sticking. So if a player gets called for high sticking, even a 2-minute minor, and the coach can prove through video that that player was actually hit by their own stick, their teammate's stick, or it was the puck that hit them, then they could get that call reversed. Again, however, same risk applies as to our last item, because since the player was already being assessed a 2-minute minor penalty, if the coach loses this challenge, they will be assessed another penalty on top of that. So again, the team would be killing off a 5-on-3 penalty instead of just a 5-on-4 situation. While I agree with Colin Campbell that none of these items are exceptionally exciting, I do think they're interesting, and some of them I absolutely agree with. I think the expansion of some of the coaches' challenges does make things a little more fair because, quite honestly, there are things that officials, it's just difficult at the real-time pace of the game to get every call correct. And so if this helps to balance the scales a little bit, I agree with that. If there's some safety regulations that come in, I agree with that as well. What I'm interested to hear about is, what do you think of these things? Do you think that these are worthy changes or updates for the GMs to have been discussing this season? Would you care or not if they were implemented next year? Emphasis there being on next year. Remember, I said this all has to go through an approval with the Board of Governors over the summer. So next season, the 2024-25 season, would be the earliest that we would see these changes. But hey, there's still a lot going on this season, even though the Montreal Canadiens likely aren't making the playoffs. But in case you missed it, there is a lot of buzz going on in the city of Montreal right now because last year's 5th overall draft pick, David Reinbacher, has joined the Laval Rocket now that his season in Switzerland has ended. He came into Laval this week for his first practice. He will go out on the road with them where they will play 3 games this weekend. And if you would like to know everything happening with David Reinbacher's arrival this week, including hearing from Reinbacher himself with some audio from his post-practice interview after his very first Rocket practice, well then you are going to want to check out this video, this one right here, and I'll see you again next time.